Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unregulated Leadership. We are William James students, and we have a podcast that talks all things leadership. My name is Lavonya Douglas, and we also have here Miriam, and she's going to introduce our special guest for today.
We have a pleasure of interviewing Dennis Morgan, who is a friend of mine. Our kids have kind of been raised in the same community and in the same schools, but I love what he does as a career, but also as a community leader. So we're going to be discussing all things leadership with Dennis this morning. So good morning, Dennis.
Good morning. It's so lovely to meet you, Lavonya. Nice to see you again, Miriam.
Yes. Let's begin with telling us who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your career journey.
Yeah, sure. So my name, as you said, is Dennis Morgan. It's very nice to meet you all, and I'm really happy to be here. What I do many things. I wear many hats. The main hat that I've been wearing more recently is for the company that I started in 2020 called Harlem coLab. It has changed. It has, starting a business, it sort of has to take the routes that it needs to take in order to be successful. But I am currently sitting in a place where I'm working to really modify and augment the tech resource pipeline so that it has more people that look like me, for men and women, counting both men and women. I have been really trying to bring technology into the Harlem community, so it's not just technology for us to consume as much as it's technology for us to use, us, as I say, as a culture of Black and brown people, for us to use to create. That's really the space that I live in. And I do it, the way that I practice it is through non-coding. So a lot of times kids are learning coding, which is great. Adults are learning coding, which is also great. But I have found a career in technology, a long-term sustainable career in technology without needing to code. I deal mostly in product and project management, and I specifically do design. So I've been really focusing on bringing that skill set into the community and having conversations with people that aren't necessarily introduced with that sort of some of the times with coding, there's sort of this barrier, like you have to be really good at math or you have to be really good at, logic problems. I really try to bring something different where we're tapping more into the creative element. Not that coding isn't creative, but there's a lot of things within design. There's a lot of things within project and product management that require creative problem solving. And I really try to lead with that. So that's what I'm doing. That's like my core work that I'm doing here in the community. I'm also a professor at Teachers College. I teach advanced and introduction to game design, and have been doing that now for a full year. It is probably some of the most joy that I've had in work that I've done. I love it. I love it so much. I'm going to talk just a bit more about game design and the stuff that I do, but I'll use that to pivot into my career. So I focus a lot on the work of Gholdy Muhammad when I think about design. Gholdy Muhammad has these 5 pillars for cultivating genius when teaching culturally responsive curriculums. And the work that I do at Teachers College is really around not just game design, but games as learning. So one of the things that really attracted me to the program at Teachers College is that games, as I have always felt, are not just about playing and entertainment and joy. They're really about learning. Games teach us how to do things. Some of those things with the types of games that are out now tend to just sit in a more playful space. But I think there's more to them. And as I started to engage at the work at Teachers College, I started to find out more and more through the research about what games as learning can look like. So that's really where I focus. And those 5 pillars, I should talk just a little bit about them. Those 5 pillars revolve around identity and how we identify. And I think that is directly applicable to us as players of games and us as designers of games. Who are we designing for, which is a core product tenet. And who am I as a designer that has agency to build that for you? How do I see the world? What lens am I looking at the world through? The other core tenets are really sit more in the academic elements around skills, intellectualism. So what am I teaching you that you can sort of apply and have a skill at? What sort of knowledge base am I providing to you? These things all exist within games, and these things all are things that I believe designers need to be conscious of as we're building experiences. The fourth one is called criticality. And that's the one that I tend to find the most joy in, the one that I really, really enjoy, really pushing designers and pushing myself to look at the environments that we create, the players the non-player characters that we create, and the players themselves, to try to understand what and how can I look at this from the lens of a disproportionate or an underprivileged or underrepresented community. How can I look at a game about the environment and maybe even a period piece, right? A game that takes place in the 1870s or the 1880s. And how can I think about this through the perspective of slavery, right? When I'm building games and I'm thinking about the time periods, or I'm thinking specifically about the topic or the thematic work that we're doing, can I look at it from what it would be like to be marginalized during that time? How are we using the land, and how is the land being overused or underused or overproduced, right? Really trying to take a very critical lens at some of the things that exist in games and how we might be able to use them to increase the knowledge and increase really the engagement from the player. When I start to present those things to players and young designers, they start to see, oh, this is where the engagement can come from. It doesn't have to be through the behaviors that I'm doing in the game. It can actually come thematically to me in a way that really resonates with me and who I am, how I identify in this world. So I'll pivot just really quickly. I know I've been talking for a little bit, but I'll pivot to my career and then I'll answer more questions. So long time ago, I started doing work in hold on. How far back do we want to go? I'm going to go back to just how it lives in technology for me and design. So coming out of high school, I was probably mostly underachieving, didn't have a lot going on, was really just sort of like getting by. And I found a program that was in lasers and optics. And I had done some moderate work in math. Like I could do some algebra. But nothing like out of the box. I was not into calculus. My geometry wasn't good. I could add up, subtract, multiply, and divide, right? The basics. Mm-hmm. And I had an opportunity to sit with the guidance counselor, and she was like, oh, you can kind of do some math. You should think about this program. It was in lasers and optics. And I think at the time I was like, goodness, that sounds like Star Wars. This was a long time ago. I was like, this sounds like the right stuff for me. I found a class with his first generation Chinese. So he had a really strong accent, but he taught me how to do things I didn't know I was capable of.
And this was in community college?
Pasadena. Yeah, this is in community college. This is in Pasadena City College. His name is Wayman Liu, Dr. Wayman Liu. He's still doing work. I don't know if he's retired fully. He's still involved, from what I understand, with what we call PCC, Pasadena City College. So I'm originally from Los Angeles. And he really gave me two things. One was confidence in myself that I could do things that I didn't know I was capable of. Mm-hmm. And the other thing he did is he really provided me what I think is the framework for how I want to impact the community that I'm in. He had a pipeline. He had augmented the pipeline in a lot of ways for lasers and optics, so that he was recruiting students that looked like him. They were Chinese, Vietnamese, Japanese, and was pulling them through his program and into professional careers.
Can define what laser and optics is. Like,
Oh,
I'm
sure.
a little, yes.
Yeah, sorry. I talk about it like everybody knows. So, laser electro optics was a technology degree or a technology certification that focused mostly on how lasers are used, or this is the early 90s, how lasers were being used to measure things, how lasers were being used and fiber optics were being used to project light on things, how lasers were being used and light was being used to create holograms. So if you remember back in the early 90s, we really didn't have, there were ATMs. I don't even remember if they had those holographic little stickers on them at the time. They might have. But this was about like how that works. How do you build those things? How do those, like, that's happening at scale. So we're building lots of credit cards and we're putting this thing on that has a hologram at scale. But how do we fundamentally think about these things and design them in the early days? The other thing that, anyway, so the story is going to go way too long, so I'm going to try not to take up too much time telling my career story. From there, I got an opportunity through, just following his leadership and taking the opportunities that he was, really sort of wasn't necessarily handing out. He was finding the right people for the right jobs. I got an opportunity to work in a medical device company. And that was probably the first time I started working in product. It was a physical product. I was learning to sort of take a scientific approach to how to these were rigid endoscopes, so the devices that they use to look inside your body. Most of them are flexible now, but at that time, the majority of devices were rigid, so they were made out of stainless steel. And I was laying fiber optics in those and really starting to understand what it meant to take a scientific approach to solving problems. I sat in a room I was the only person of color in that facility, mostly Asian, but it was owned by, I think, 2 white men at the time. So I was definitely by myself, even as far as, and I don't know if it was intentional, maybe it was, I was working with some chemicals. I was working with a lot of alcohol and I was leaving the place with a huge headache, but I was learning how to what they call lay fiber optics. It's an artisanal, at the time, it was sort of an artisanal sort of thing. Learned how to do it from somebody else who showed you how to do it. And you sort of place these fiber optics in this, I'm giving you way too much, this denatured alcohol, and you lay them flat, and you sort of massage them into these tubes, and you glue them with all these really toxic chemicals, and you sort of build these scopes. And learn how to, what was the other thing, solder. So I was learning how to work with my hands, but learning in a high-tech field, how to do these things. And specifically, I felt I was learning, at least looking back on it, how to design. The owners of the company would come to me and say, hey, we've now got a new opportunity for scopes that are looking at this angle, and we've never built any light systems that can do that. Can you take a look at it? So I would come up with a bunch of prototypes, I would measure things, and I would be really systematic about my process and approach. And looking back on it, I think that was sort of the opening door. Fast forward to must have been 10 years from there, I got an opportunity to work at an educational company here in New York, Kaplan Test Prep. And at Kaplan, I started building my first game. And I think I realized at that point, that was really what I wanted to do. Games were really how I wanted to do it. And I started working in the same way, trying to be really systematic and scientific about my approach. What do the users need? How do we understand whether we're successful? Trying to map those pieces out. Really fast forward, and I find myself back in the industry. I had left for a while and didn't think it was going to fit for me. But the more I seemed to leave during that time, the more it drew me back. So I am now back fully ready to embrace it. And I've been seeing so much success and opportunity and blessings come my way. I can't even imagine that this was something possible 20 years ago.
Thank you. I mean, when I asked for your career journey, I wasn't expecting it. It's very inspiring because I think many people assume that people in this field is a natural knack or is something that they inherently they know. Often people think that people are supposed to be good at math and science. And you probably weren't average. You know, I don't think you were an average student. You probably had an average education. I always say a lot of people aren't average. Is what they've been given is mediocre.
That's fair.
And so thank you. You actually answered a lot of questions. So
I have a habit
I
of
was like,
doing
he's
that, man.
killing me right now. Like I have nothing. Like
You know,
we
you
can end the
just
show
turn
right
me
now.
on. You turn me
You
on,
made
and I
so
can
many good
chat it up.
points. You made so many
Yeah,
good points.
I'm happy to expand on anything. Sorry, Lavonya.
No. One of the things you said, I don't remember exactly who the person was, but you said he hired the right people for the right positions, right? And so, as leaders, a lot of times we hire to fill positions because we need something done, but they're not the right people for that position. And so, as you have created your own business and you're doing these things, how do you hire the right people for the right positions, or how do you connect people and their skills? Like you said, like I don't like math either. I have to use my calculator as of today to add, right? And so it doesn't mean that we're not good in other things. So how do you connect to people's strengths in this field, in this area, and put them in the right places? Because it sounds like there's so much that you can do in this world.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm still learning it. It's not something that again, Wayman, I thanked him on LinkedIn, and I think he was like, who, what? Like it had been 100 years since I spoke to him, but I really try to follow what he did and just try to teach the things that I know. And I try to start from there. I try to create as many opportunities for people so that they can sort of engage in the work that I'm doing and see it through my lens. Like I said, I'm still learning. I feel like I'm constantly, not that I'm failing. It's like I struggle to really, sometimes I feel like I'm not setting everyone up for success. And I feel like it's because of the way I learned it, right? So I've learned it through this sort of trial and error, and it's come with so many downsides, right? It's come from companies like, I've been laid off so many times because it wasn't the right fit. They had, to your point, they had not picked the right person for the job. What I'm starting to do now is be much more transparent and honest about who I am and what I can provide. I think it allows people an opportunity to really assess, is this right for me? What's really great about it is when there is a failure, it's not contentious. It's like, hey, we recognize that this wasn't right. I'm like, let's just have an honest conversation about how we can either make it right, or maybe I can find something else that'll move you into the right position. I think the other thing is, with one of the, so through the Harlem coLab, we do an internship with Whole Foods. And we had identified a young woman who became the candidate for our pilot for the program. And it was way outside of the scope of what she had been looking for. But the way I presented, again, speaking honestly and frankly and from my true self, is like, she was in social work and that's where she wanted to go. She was at Fordham. But I really explained, like, most of the jobs that we have today are going to become technologized or something. They're going to become more technical as we go. And what I want to do is provide you an opportunity to see what that looks like. And maybe, just maybe, there might be other opportunities because the people I'm connecting you with are open-minded. They recognize that not everybody's going to come in with machine learning background. So they're not expecting that. What they are expecting is to get somebody really smart, really driven, which you check all of those boxes. And they're really trying to provide you an opportunity to see how Whole Foods functions, make the connections within the organization. And me as the Harlem coLab will work with you to make the best of those opportunities. You don't have to be this perfect fit into Whole Foods because it might not be a good fit. And we leave the space, right, to be failure is not a great word, but like to not have the success we anticipate, but to find other successes and opportunities around the way. Maybe that's a better way to say it.
Mm-hmm. We have and when I am working with youth and young adults, that actually failing is very powerful. Like to be able to embrace any opportunity fail, because that's either a time for us to get to become better, but also to recognize certain skills and competencies that you lack in that area that will make you stronger. And so I I like the word failure. I think I've become very accustomed to be able to recognize and be humble enough to say, this didn't work out. I failed at this. Because the true failing is when you decide I'm going to quit and not try it. But when you fail at something and you continue to like fail until it becomes a success story, that there's empowerment in that.
So even as you say that, Mary, I'm sorry, I'm just going to riff a little bit about what you're saying and lean into design a bit. So when I'm designing experiences, whether those be games or apps, what's really important is providing the user or the player feedback that it didn't work and giving them the opportunity to reflect on why. Because that is the learning moment, right?
Yes.
I clicked the button, it didn't take me where I wanted to go. One, me as a designer, I'm like, okay, what did I do that correctly? Maybe it's not on them. And two, like I provide them the feedback that they need so that they know, hey, this is how we remediate. You did fail, it didn't work, but let's talk about how we remediate. So the next time you come into the experience, you build success. So 100%. I totally appreciate that. You're absolutely right.
Hey, and I know in the game, any type of IT career, a lot of things happen. I mean, through trial and error. I mean, it's really the error part that people are looking for. People are looking for the errors so that they could make it more successful. Let me ask you, let's go off of this. I mean, you provided so much, but I just want to get a little bit more about Dennis, the actual like designer. And like, your favorite game growing up, like what was your favorite system? What would you change? Like I remember, and I have I only had like 2 games in my life, and I'm not a gamer. I heard that there's half and half, like there's 52% of men that game and 48%. So it's almost equal amount of men and women that game in this country. But I only like 2 games, but one I'm going to Zelda. That was like, I remember to 5 a.m. as a preteen teen playing Zelda. And I remember thinking there has to be a way I can contact the company and tell them how they can make this better. It was this, it really wasn't really about the pixels, or I didn't know the words. It was really how it could be more like Zelda was a damsel in distress. Like there needs to be more heroines. There needs to be more. So there were so many things in that game that I remember used to jotting it down.
Love that.
I used to jot it down thinking like if I had made this game, it would be so much better, but it was so great and hypnotizing to me at the time. What is your favorite game and what would you change about that game? Or can you identify a game that you actually would go, you know what, if I had created this, I would create the sequel a little different.
Yeah, that's a really hard question, Miriam. Like most questions aren't really hard for me, but that one's really hard because so the way I engage with games, whether they be video games or board games, is I don't generally play them. Like it's rare that I play them to have fun.
Oh,
Usually unpacking them and trying to make sense of the meaning. In game design, we talk about meaningful decisions.
Oh, yeah, you're too much of an intellectual for me.
There is a game that we've been playing with my family that I do play for fun. And the other thing to just be really clear on is like, and I'm gonna go on the record with this. Like I don't often play games to win. So I'm really trying to understand why they make the design decisions that they do. But some of the times I sit there and I do try to win. There's a game we've been playing at home. And I guess part of it is like the game that I like the most is usually the game I'm currently playing. So the game we've been playing a game called Quinto, Kwinto. My wife picked it up around Christmas and it is so elegantly designed. It's a what they call a roll and write game. So similar to Yahtzee. Yahtzee is a roll and write game.
Yeah.
So this one, you roll 3 dice that are of 3 different colors. And as the numbers come up, you can put them in specific rows that match the color of the dice. I hardly ever win. My wife always wins. But I like it because it's simple. The math is simple. It's just adding and subtracting. The decisions that you have to make, the meaningful decisions, are ones that are really sort of hinging on this sort of luck, this unpredictable or chaotic sort of system of rolling dice. And it has this sort of press your luck feeling to it. It's like, oh boy, should I take a chance? If I take a chance, can I roll a 2 on one dice? Like, I can do that sort of math, and it's fun to play with. So that's one. The other game I'm playing right now is Red Dead Redemption. I'm kind of late to the party on this one, but my son and I have been sort of playing through, and I've been playing it mostly because of another project I'm working on. There's a project I'm working on that's around horses, and this has lots of horses and horse behavior. And sometimes it sucks you in, and next thing you know, I'm walking. It's probably too violent for a game that some people should be playing. I try to watch it when my son is playing it, so I'm sort of there as the adult in the room. That might not be a good idea though, because it's sort of like I'm advocating the violence. But I try to play the game as like a nice cowboy. I don't shoot people randomly. At least I try not to.
All right. Thank you for that. Lavonya, do you have?
So, as you speak, everything comes back to me with like leadership, right? And even with how you're creating things and how you're bringing people into this space, like you're bringing that, like sometimes we do leadership things and it's not like you have a position of leadership, right? And so it's like you just are that leader and you're bringing this into this realm. Like there's leadership in everything. I would have never, first of all, I don't know anything about what you do. Okay. You was talking about ATMs earlier, and I was like, I just used the ATMs. I don't even think about who makes them or who makes them better or anything, right? But there's a whole leadership structure and strategy on ATMs, right?
Yeah.
But the question that I do have is, what are the components of social responsibility and leadership in the gaming industry?
Oh boy. So right now, games are going through they always lead for technology change and how technology is going to be used to change behaviors. But they're sort of going through a reckoning, which probably should have happened a long time ago. So what we've seen, let me back up. There are all sorts of issues I see within the game industry that deal with like how games exist in society, not just from a play perspective, but from an organizational structure and who runs them, right? So games are generally works that come from white men, most of the studios. So you can imagine most of the behaviors that we see exhibited in games and the skills, if we go back to the shooting and the punching, the jumping, the trope that you had talked about, the damsel in distress, right? Like that I feel, this is my personal opinion, stems from a lot of that. Right? Who's leading the industry? Who's telling the stories? So there's a gender problem. I'm trying to address a color problem, a racialized problem. But there is a huge gender problem. Those things are slowly starting to overcome. But I'm going to go to GDC this year. I had GDC, Games Developer Conference for 2023. I have not been in over 10 years, so I'm happy to go back and sort of see how things have changed. I'm going to be in most of the conversations in the what they call independent games. So games that are developed by smaller publishers and smaller groups of people. And specifically looking for more conversations about how games industries are going to be addressing issues of color and race. But one of the things that I think is really starting to change, where I think games will hopefully lead, is about employment. So, like I said, I've been laid off a ton of times from technology companies, and maybe there's a bigger issue with like at-will employment. But I would love to see more conversations about unionizing technology. And I think that the game studios can be a way to enter that conversation. There's a large population. When I worked in games, we were incredibly overworked, 13, 16, 20 hours straight, and then back at it again. They always sort of provide, you can go into Google offices, there's food, there's caterers, but the expectation is that you're not leaving, right?
Wow.
You're going to be, I'm not throwing shade at Google, but this is just how tech is run. Finding work-life balance in technology has been really, really hard, especially in games. And I would love to see conversations about what a union could look like. How do you protect them? Because you've seen it, like we're seeing it now over the last few months, like hundreds of thousands of people, I think it's in the hundreds of thousands, have been laid off from technology companies.
Right.
And that is a regular practice every 6 to 10 years. Like, that's just how it is. And, what's nice is
because of the shift, like there's change.
That's a great question. I think that's for varying reasons. So I was first laid off from a tech job when Obama was elected. So the economy had fallen.
Mhm.
Right. I think the second time, was still in that recession period. So it's easy to just sort of lay people off during a recession. I think companies are trying to just trim. So I really don't know. My guess is they get too heavy and bloated and they just cut people out. Okay, keep this one, not that one. I don't know, but it's cyclical. You can see it. You can always predict when it's going to happen. And I've often been the one that's been wrapped up in it. And what's nice, if you can look at a bright side, is that there are many opportunities come about. So going back to leadership, what happens, and this is I expect to see, so Google, Facebook, Amazon, all these people laying people off, maybe some with technology experience, probably a large portion of them. But these ladies and gentlemen, are going to find opportunities to start working together to take the knowledge that they have and start building something new. So you get this cycle where they cut a bunch of people out, and then those people have opportunities to get together to build businesses and to build more technology that can, maybe some of the times, I think if I was doing it, I think with some of the work I'm doing, I'm a bit spiteful to some. I shouldn't be. I shouldn't carry that burden. But, sometimes I'm like, yeah, this would really show those companies that they shouldn't have cut me, and I can work with the best of them and we can build something incredible. I have a couple startups that I'm working with right now, and we're building some really, really interesting stuff in the medical space and stuff in the DEI space, which is Apple and those companies aren't thinking about that. That's not where they're trying to go.
Right.
And I think it's my mission to bring that stuff to the forefront and start building tools with that in mind.
That's awesome.
I'm glad you spoke about that. You also answered one of my questions, because according to the International Game Developers Association, 71% of game developers globally are men, 24% are women, and 3% are non-binary. But on a race aspect, 2% of developers are just Black, while 69% identify as white. And so in hearing your conversation, also learning about your journey, you are talking about the influence and how we can diversify the game industry, and people getting together and I guess pulling in their brilliance to create their own businesses. You can't lay yourself off. I mean, you give it's this
You're right.
That people learn how to, but it's also being able to give them, again, I guess, the confidence. I think people feel more not comfortable. That's not the word. They, I know so many people who I feel like they could, branch out on their own and have their own company, but there's a level of, I would rather work for someone else. Yeah. Right.
I've been looking at it as self-efficacy.
Yeah.
Can we build the strength within ourselves to do it? So a couple things. First one is I'm working on a project now. I just reached out to a number of women of color because I need concept artists. I need people who can work in a area of art and design that is not always seen with people of color.
Give me 1 second. I have a long-standing ambulance.
Yeah, it's coming by me too. We live near each other.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Probably driving as slow as possible. Yeah. So, to that point, I'm trying to pull, and with so what's great is the people that I've gotten involved with more recently. One of the stakeholders was just I said, I can only push this so far visually. I need a concept artist to come in and help us ground what it is we're making. And I told her, I said, I'd love it to be a woman. I'd love it to be a woman of color. And she was like, yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And yes, and make sure, Dennis, that they have a passion for DEI. I don't want anybody into this space that isn't on board with what we're building. And that's the first time I've heard that going into a game project. There's a few other projects I'm working on where I'm just trying to be really thoughtful about who I bring in and how I grow this from a group of 4 to a group of 8 to 16, like have that grow exponentially. I still haven't figured that out. Like I'm still trying to really reconcile with like how Wayman Liu, that was his name, Dr. Liu, how he was able to really start pushing people through the pipeline. He had a good base, right? He was working at a university. Maybe it's changing the university I work at, sadly.
In your class in Teachers College, the student makeup, is it diverse in the classes that you teach?
No. It's predominantly East Asian.
Okay. As I expected.
Yeah. And like, I look, that school has provided me every opportunity. I shouldn't say every opportunity. They've provided me opportunities that I didn't know were possible. And like, for me to get back into games, like I'm trying to like really balance with like, okay, maybe this is just the stepping stone versus the landing spot. And, one of the parts of my business that I've been really hard on myself is that I'm not finding I'm finding great, talented individuals, but I want more of them to look like me. And I'm like, as I'm sitting in Teachers College, I'm like, well, do I need to let the other students that look like me know that I'm there and I'm teaching something that might be outside of what they've been thinking? I don't want to take anyone off their path, right? Like if we have strong Black and Latino men and women and queer that are trying to do good work in education, I don't want to take them off that path, but I want them to sort of open their eyes to see like there's a lot of different ways that we're teaching this, and there's a lot of different ways that you might be able to become involved that you weren't expecting.
And how
sometimes people don't know that that's a path. If they don't know, it's like you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah,
right.
And one of the things that I was thinking about is like, do you talk about what you're doing? Do you intentionally say, I'm in this diverse space and I'm looking for this diverse population specifically for this, or do you just bring in the diverse population? So like as you're creating these games so that they don't like just look like or feel like one specific, are you bringing awareness to this, the characteristics of this character is, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do people know that that's what's happening? Or is it just that you do it and be it, and then it kind of infiltrates the system? Like, how does...
I hope the second point is probably what, I mean, the challenge is there's only one of me and there's only so many waking hours that I have,
Yeah.
I'm trying to get better at that. I'm not really trying to get better at that. Let me be honest. I'm just trying to do it all as much as I can, like do as much as I can in the hours that I have. And maybe you're right. Maybe it's more a matter of like getting out and like broadcasting it a bit more. Cause I'm trying to just, Miriam knows, like I'm trying to just bring my energy and hoping that that's enough. Like the light shines so bright that people are like, hey, what are you doing here? It works some of the time.
One of the ways, and taking it from your professor who helped you get on this path, you might want to hold, just a talking forum. Put your name, put it up, especially to all of the cultural groups, and see if they're interested, because they are definitely interested in gaming. Is there a lucrative career for them? Is there space for them at the table? Yeah. And I think that's where an unregulated leader operates, right? Where you're thinking out of the box and trying to go, you can still be in education. Like you're in education now. I would have never thought you'd be a college professor, and still, infiltrate the areas that they, again, probably didn't know there was space for them, or it will have direct contact or have a representation of them up there teaching it.
So can I just take a moment and just say thank you really quickly? So Miriam and I have been friends for a long time, but Miriam exists as a mentor of mine. I really appreciate everything you just said, everything you continue to say to me. I'm going to take that to heart. Thank you. Yeah. I think that, just as both of you are saying, Vanya, I think I'm hearing it come from you as well. I think there's opportunities that I can take to make it easier on myself to broadcast wider. Right. It doesn't have to be on my back. And this is what I'm honestly trying to get better at, like trying not to shoulder the entire burden, right? Carrying the entire population on my back, one person at a time or 1,000 people at a time, trying to utilize some of the channels that are available to me that I need to get better at.
And building your team so that you are the visionary and they are the people that are going. And so like you expand, but you don't have to be the expander of it all. Like you have
Right.
this team that is doing it with you. Like they don't know. I've never had this conversation with anybody. I don't know. I know Tetris and like Joust, right?
Yeah,
Like
I
those,
respect Joust is a classic. I love Joust.
but they
I don't
don't
even know
know.
jazz.
That's old school. We must be the same age. I know we're all the same age, but I play lots of video games. I remember, this is totally off topic, but one of the reasons I got into video games because I had an addiction in elementary school. We're talking 1980s. And there was a little cafe that was on my way to school. My father would give me like 75 cents, $1.15, whatever it was, to go to school and buy lunch. And every day I would walk in there and spend my entire lunch money on this game called Star Castle. I'd go in every day and my friends would be there and I'd be dropping quarters, playing, show up to school, no lunch. Hungry as could be, so hungry. This is like incredibly bad behavior. But I couldn't stop. I just kept playing and I kept going through the cycle. And I remember one day I got home and I was almost passed out. I hadn't eaten. And my father's like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "I had to confess." I'm like, "I spent all my money on the video game." He's like, "Well, this is what you get. So don't do that anymore. Don't go around asking people for food. Just take your money. Don't spend it at the place." And I think it was really at that moment that I learned to, like, some of my mechanisms for coping with that type of addiction. Like I can shut things down if I feel like I'm heading down a path. Like it just becomes really like, I'll just stop and I can go about my way. But it was for that reason that when I took my first game job, I was like, this is the games industry paying me back for all of those days of hunger.
Right, as they should. Right. You invested a lot of time, energy, and money.
And money.
I said, I need it back. You guys need to give it back to me.
I love it.
From that point that I just loved them so much. There's so much fun designing and playing. And the people I meet, I mean, especially with that trauma that we sort of go through in building them and the arguments, you build a brotherhood. And what's really, really nice, I haven't talked to some of these people in 10, 15 years. When I reach out, they're like, "Dennis, how's it going? It's been forever. What are you doing?" Like, I started talking to them maybe 2 years ago as I started working or a year and a half ago as I started working here at Columbia. And it's just almost like we haven't missed a beat. And they're always open to having chats and extending themselves. Like it's sort of this brotherhood that we built. And I'm trying to find, like today, again, this morning was just like trying to get that group of resources to point me in a direction of people that don't look like them, right? But could potentially start to open opportunities for other people. And that's my hope.
Well, we're about to wrap up. I have one last question.
Please.
So tell me, what are the habits? If you can give me the habits of you as an unregulated leader, what would it be?
So, the things that I try to make a habit, I try to make sure that I'm always doing something creative each day. Whether that just be, on my run, listening to music that I had made or beats that I put together, like just trying to indulge in a free thinking space where I can be creative and take in the environment. The other thing I try to make a habit of, and it probably sits within that same space, is just giving myself space to be who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So much of my time can be taken away with all these other things and these demands, and I try to just give myself space to think. I don't really have a great creative studio right now, so the studio I have is really on my computer, and I try to use that space as creatively as I can, but I'm trying to always keep something going. If I die, and not die, but if I some project becomes stagnant, I always try to make sure I have something else to bounce to, or something else to think about, or something else I can start to consume creatively, because that's where I feel I get my most of my energy. And the other thing is just trying to stay connected with Miriam, with a friend of ours, Janisha. There's other people in my universe, and my wife, who help to really keep me thinking and pushing me forward and giving me space to think about things differently. I think that, making sure that I have those conversations regularly is really important. It keeps me going.
Thank you. Well, you just gave a segue to our next guest, which will be Janisha.
Oh, great.
So thank you
I didn't
so
know
much
that.
for your time. Lavonya, you have any last minute words?
I really just appreciate you bringing awareness to this. I see this. I'm a visionary, so I'm like seeing all these things you doing, master classes and all these other things
Right.
that reach the masses and people. Like you were talking about the girl at Whole Foods, and she's on this path, but she made there's so many ways that we can use this, even in the fields that we're in. We just don't know, and so I appreciate you shining light on this and coming here to talk to us and sharing all your knowledge. We appreciate you coming, and it was so nice to meet you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Thank you. I'll see you around.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's so lovely to meet you. Happy to come back if you ever want to have more conversations.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.